Welcome back for episode 4 of the EUphoria podcast. It is season 5, and this week we've brought on Caedrel. He's going to be talking to us about season 10 jungle, and as well as kind of figuring out what changes he and Yamatocannon would want to make for their dream jungle, as well as the top 5 junglers in the LEC. As always, we're available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SoundCloud. And to kick things off, we're going to play the greatest game of all time. All right, welcome to a segment that we are calling Spot the Inter. Inevitably, anytime a gank goes wrong, someone is at fault. It could be the laner, it could be the jungler, and since Caedrel's here, he's going to help us dissect the differences. Who is the Inter in any given play? Now, I'll give you guys the play-by-play if you're in podcast land so you understand what play, hopefully paint a nice, beautiful picture for you, and we'll get some reactions from Yamatocannon and Caedrel. And let's take a look at the first play. All right, so for context, our first play is between XL and Mad Lions from last week of the LEC. It starts as Humanoid, tries to back, protected by his jungler Shadow. Suddenly, a wild Pantheon runs into the tower, flashes over the wall, one-shots him. Now Elise is left alone with Mickey as Mickey righteously lays his spear into the face of a spider and kills the spider too. That's all you need to know. Happens right by the Raptor Pits, a quick double kill, a supreme display of balance. But I'm curious, you lived this moment, Caedrel.
Yeah.
So who's the Inter here? Who made the mistake? Was it Humanoid? Was it Shadow?
Well, I guess it's hard to say, but I don't think Humanoid should have flashed away in the first place, level 2. And then I guess they didn't expect it to be warded, because who expects their Raptors to be warded at 3 minutes? But as soon as Mickey flashed over the wall, I think, yeah, they're both just dead.
So are they both the Inter?
So I guess they're both the Inter, yeah. Maybe Elise could have actually flashed away and just gone 1-0 instead of 2-0. So I guess both of them are Inting.
I like the twist.
You like the twist?
I like the ward. Ward MVP. Did you put this word?
So for record, there's a ward in the Raptor Pit that spots Elise and Rise backing.
I don't think
or Rise backing and Elise killing the can.
I think it was Mickey's ward.
Okay.
I don't know how he got a ward there, but I have Sweeper, so it must have been him.
Ward MVP. Holy.
Yeah.
Man, Mickey, the one man army.
Absolutely.
All right.
Madman.
So I'm going to be honest with you, Caedrel. When we started to do this segment, the original plan was we're going to get three plays to recap the LEC. But through the joy of internet research, we've now got one play to recap the LEC. That was this one.
Okay.
And now we're going down a frickin' rabbit hole. So get ready. We'll give you play 2 next.
We're going down memory lane.
Yeah, so this is from Season 3, Dragonborn's vs. Fnatic.
Okay.
You'll note that the gank here is happening on the bottom side of the map, but does feature top laners Soaz of Fnatic and Yamatocannon of brief fame on the Dragonborns.
Oh boy.
Also, it's from Season 3, so the map looks like utter trash. So be ready for that. Yeah, so first off, we have legendary Soaz Nunu as unknown Jarvan jungler whose name I cannot read is standing. Soaz walks in, he consumes, he's back to full health. Yamatocannon is doing no damage, but then it's a flag and drag and ignite, and Cyanide waddles out of the bush at the last possible moment to try to Q and gets absolutely nothing done. So here's the question. One, if you're not on YouTube right now and this play seems confusing to you, there is a Nasus jungle. The Nasus jungle is Cyanide. It's also Season 3 and every champion looks completely different than what they look like now. So I encourage you to watch this one in real time.
You made the mistake of letting me choose the clips.
I did.
Because you can play spot the Inter, but you can also spot the insane
The Smurfer.
wave management right there.
And the early ignite on the Nunu, you're like denying the healing.
Yeah.
Okay, so aside from a Yamato ego boost, how do you feel about this play in general? It can be spot the Inter. It can also just be like, holy crap, what a mess of a game.
Can we watch it again?
Yeah, we can watch it again.
I think there's a small bit of int going on, but I just need to make sure.
I'm sitting right here, okay?
Watch the play again.
So the EQ comes in.
Yep.
Nasus comes out the bush. It's hard to say actually, because Nunu has no flash, so it's a smart counter gank, but it's a smart gank. I think they lose 2v2, so it's hard to find the Inter here. I guess Soaz is the Inter because he's playing Nunu. That's my conclusion.
Yes.
All right, spot the Inter Soaz. Well, now this is fun fact. Since you randomly brought in a replay of your competitive days, I got pinged by stats as we were doing.
Oh no,
like,
don't go there, man.
Did you know that on average you died 4 times a game as a top laner?
Yeah.
Wow. There you
I
go.
know it. People have told me over and over. This is in my nightmares. statistic. I thought you would bring up my win ratio, which is even
I was thinking.
No, I
worse.
think we all know how
Do
bad.
you remember who won that game?
Probably not us.
Oh,
I think we lost. Yeah, we lost definitely.
sad times.
I would remember if I beat Fnatic when.
You would definitely bring that up. I feel like every
Yeah.
time we talk about it, you're like, I've beaten Fnatic before, and let me tell you, it's no easy feat. All right, our third and final play comes from a very far away league known as the LCS, formerly the NALCS. Now I'm going to warn you all for at home. If you haven't watched this play, it's worth watching with your eyes, but I'll do my best to explain with you. But this is going to be the biggest catastrophe that we have ever witnessed or heard on the EUphoria podcast. Meteos running to mid lane to help Ryoma. Ryoma instantly one-shots Crown. Crown goes back under his tier 1 tower, Coling behind him. He goes golden in the Zanyas. The flag and drag from Meteos comes in on a stunned target. He misses completely. He clicks the wrong way. He can no longer Cataclysm. He's forced to Cataclysm Wiggly under the tower. He instantly dies. Caedrel?
I mean, Jarvan is just the dirtiest inter of them all. Isn't he? So first of all, the EQ, he can time it better because I think you can kill him as he comes out of Zhonya's.
If you time it right, he instantly dies.
Yeah, but even though he didn't do that, even when Lucian dashes, you can still ultimate him like pretty much instantly.
But he clicked the wrong way, and
Yeah.
you can see it. This is the best.
I think-
is that Meteos clicks the wrong way after missing the EQ, and then can no longer click because Lucian flash dashes out of the way.
He looked a bit dizzy there, I'm not gonna lie. But I think that he could have definitely ulted him as soon as he came out of the Zhonya's, but happens.
Do you feel like this is the worst jungle play of 2020?
I saw one, it was another Jarvan who like EQ'd in, flash EQ'd, I think he was Wiggly, who flash EQ'd onto a Rek'Sai and then just died. Level 4 in mid lane. I saw that one was even more dirty than this one, I think, but this one was pretty bad.
My bad, I guess. Couldn't find it. This one was my favorite. I liked it.
This one's good.
Yeah.
This is like so comically bad that like I think you just forgive me. Like I forgive Meteos for this play. I'm like, this is.
Do you?
Yeah, I mean, this is like a once in a lifetime mistake.
Will be remembered.
This is not like was it the Jensen or the Bjerg? It was the Jensen Zanyas or whatever in Game 5, or the Bjergsen Zanyas in Game 5 that people still bring up all the time to flame. This is so comically, hilariously bad that you're just going to give the benefit of the doubt that it was an off day.
I just feel bad for Zoe, because she actually is about to solo kill a world champion.
From
And your
O's,
jungler
with the
just comes
O's
in.
import, you come in, you're
Yeah.
going to solo kill a world champion, your jungler's like, don't worry, bro, I got you.
I've got you, and just runs it down and gives him a kill. Sucks. Yeah.
I think 100 Thieves won this game, though.
Really?
That's the craziest part about it. After this, running it down, I think CLG is 0-4. So
Are they?
it's, I think so.
Well, dude, I don't know. I don't actually. Outside of these wonderful highlights that you share with me, I don't watch a lot of LCS. I'm not going to lie to you.
That's pretty
But these are the moments I live for. The truly great plays and the truly let's just call them the big in plays.
Yeah, I saw this on Twitter together with some like jungle music from like some game that's 20 years
Oh
old.
yeah, Chakras linked. It's the
Yeah.
Donkey Kong
Yeah,
music.
exactly. Yeah, good stuff.
All right, that's going to be it for Spot the Inter. 3 plays across the years of League of Legends. The Inters were... Who were the Inters? Shadow, because he could have left. Soaz, because he played top Nunu in, I think, Season 3. I don't know if that was good in
Which
season-
might have been good, but it's
Which
just,
might have
just
been
funny.
good. It's just funny. And last but certainly not least, certainly the most actually, is Meteos with the single worst display of Jarvan mechanics we've seen in many years.
Many years.
All right, Caedrel. We've got another 30 plays for you to live. I'm kidding. We're here to talk to you today about the jungle. As much as we love playing Spot the Inter, it is my favorite game. We'll have more opportunities in the future. But we're here today to talk about a couple things. One is the state of the jungle. And I would say the jungle is a mess from an outside viewer's perspective. From a person who played jungle one time in preseason, was confused how someone got 5 levels ahead of me. I never touched it again, frankly. But watching you run around the map on your your Jarvan or your whatever at level 4 while you're solo at level 7 is a bit traumatic. How do you feel about the season 10 jungle changes? A lot happened, a lot going through. 10.3 is going to offer some more changes maybe to make things better, but as we're still playing on 10.2, like how do you feel about this season's jungle so far?
Well, I think throughout Season 9, basically last year, I think most junglers were just doing like red golems raptors, and then from there they just decided what to do with the game. I think when they did the jungle changes with the Gromp, for example, I think they wanted to kind of give junglers more options, like more pathing, which I think they kind of succeeded at. Now you can get level 3 in multiple different waves. You can go to Krugs, you can go to Gromp, you can take the enemy Gromp, which is really important now. So there's definitely a lot more diversity in the jungle in terms of pathing, but the XP is just so low now that no matter what option you choose, you're ending up at like the light at the end of the tunnel is you're going to be down 3 levels no matter what. So, I mean, yeah, it did give birth to like junglers like Jarvan where you can be really aggressive early game. And I think that's how the jungle kind of works now. When the changes came in, I think most junglers are like, oh, now I just have to sit in my jungle and farm all game. But it's kind of the opposite. It's like you have to spam gank and then pray you get XP from minions. So yeah.
When we look at it, you talk about opening the way for champions like Jarvan. Do you feel like there's a lot of champions that were also cut out? Because I feel like as long as we've been looking at the jungle meta, it's been some variation of Lee Sin, Elise, Jarvan, Gragas. Olaf is something that a lot of people have picked, and it's kind of never gone away. But we're not. I feel like for the last year and a half, we haven't really seen much jungle diversity past the Karthus that showed up and was promptly nerfed afterwards, or the Kiana, maybe a Talia. But outside of those 3 picks kind of coming in and out, it feels like it's always just been those constant 4 to 5 champions.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that there's 2 different tiers in jungle. You have the farm till 3 items tier, which is like Graves, Kha'Zix, Nidalee. And then you have the spam gank and invade, which is Lee Sin and Elise Jarvan. And I think that you only see a change in the champion pool when you buff the XP or you change the items in jungle. I don't think there's any other way to kind of label the different types of junglers without actually changing items or XP. I think just nerfing XP means more ganking junglers are just better because there's no point farming anymore. And obviously, if you sit in your jungle nowadays as Graves and Kha'Zix and farming, then no matter what you do, you're going to be 3 levels down. So, yeah, it's kind of hard to open that door up for farming junglers.
Does it feel, Yamato, from your perspective, does it feel very restricted? Because on the one hand, you talked about like, oh, the pathing can be much more intelligent, it can be much more varied. It feels like there's more going on there. But also, you're as you said, you're 3 levels down, and you can play basically 5 champions. It feels like. Mm-hmm. Does it feel limited to you, Yamato, from your perspective?
It's limited in the fact that, like, sure, I think like you have a level 3 power spike, and that's the time where you might be ahead a level if you gank bottom maybe. Or maybe top, depending on your jungler. I think beyond that, just the gap to reach 6 is the most difficult part. I remember there was a time back in season 4, I believe, or season 3, where I remember facing Moscow 5, and what they were doing almost always was that they just gave mid lane waves to Diamond Procs. And then he reached level 6 first, and whatever jungler reached level 6 first just won the game, because he got ult first and won the first 2v2. So that was like the strategy. And maybe this is where we have to go. Like you just make sure that you have a mid laner that can clear jungle camps, and then you kind of share kind of everything. You got to do kind of almost a double funnel or something. I don't know. It's strange. But as a laner, I love the new jungle because it's so easy to clear. It's always there. It's just spawning. It's like, oh.
You're like, oh, those are your raptors? No, those are my raptors.
Yes. And so I just look in Rise, and just Rise is like designed to kill jungle, so it's perfect. Other than that, I think like the jungle champions, the reason the meta is the way it is because these champions don't need that much gold to be valuable. And in terms of the champion pool, we mentioned Elise, Gragas, and Lee Sin being a part of it. There was a time where these champions were like the most OP laners. Yeah. And then I feel like Riot has accepted that these champions are going to be junglers, and they've like committed to the idea of making them junglers. And maybe that's the next step. Just accept that this champion is a jungler, and then just balance them completely around jungle.
I mean, it'd be interesting to see like what that looks like, because now, I mean, we've got jungle changes coming in hot. Sejuani potentially coming back. Sejuani is the other big one that I forgot that was nerfed out of existence. Yeah. That's the other champion, the vaguely tanky kit, full of CC and/or doing potential and/or AOE
and one-shot potential,
and also one-shot potential. Sejuani was a wonderful display of balance. I'm looking forward to solo lane Camille coming back if Sejuani does as well. But I mean, like when I look at this, when I look to me, it just. The general sentiment around this that I'm reading and that I'm, kind of talking to Ender about is that it just feels like there are situations in SoloQ where like if you're like an insane jungle and you're just better than your opponent, you get like 4 levels up and you feel like a god. But in pro, it just looks miserable. Like every time I see a jungler go top against a Rumble and they're level 4 and Rumble's level 6, I'm convinced they're going to get one shot. Like how much do you are you very conscious all the time when you're playing about like how much weaker you are than like enemy solo laners? Does it feel much more risky to like go for the ganks that when you were talking about earlier, you say like you pretty much have to go for these ganks?
Yeah, so I think Yamato was right. I think level 3 you're obviously kind of strong, so going for these ganks is really good. And then kind of whichever jungler gets to 6 first is obviously 10 times stronger than the other jungler. So I think, like, let's say your mid lane gets solo killed and there's a huge wave coming into tower. If your jungler can soak up that wave, even though he got solo killed, it feels amazing because you're almost 2 levels up now, somehow out of nowhere. So it still feels good. So when you do go for these ganks, like you are level 6, but if your mid lane doesn't get solo killed, then you're level 4. It's just how it goes. But I think, yeah, I mean, if you have no flash from like level 3 ganking, and then you go top and enemy rumbles level 6, and you like E onto him as Gragas, yeah, you're going to the fountain, I think. I think that it's tricky to know your limits, but I think it's something you have to get accustomed to. But I think that junglers obviously have a lot less dueling potential now. And I think that when you do get Red Smite and 2 longswords, for example, on Rek'Sai and Lee Sin, you do have some dueling potential. And then when you get Warrior, you're kind of strong, but then it's just downhill from there. When Ryze has 2 items and he presses E, Q, W on you or something, you're just one shot. Yeah, there's no way around it really.
I love how level-headed you are about it, because like everything that I read is like very intense, like very extreme, right? Like people are just generally hyperbolic on the internet, so they're like, "This is awful. Playing jungle is miserable," and you're like, "Yeah, it's different. It's balanced. It's a little tough, but I make it work."
Yeah, I mean, it's like everyone knows jungle sucks now, right? So at one point, instead of complaining about it, you just have to embrace it, and I think that's what most pro junglers have done. They just embrace it that they're dogs, so you just have to adapt.
Is there the thing that I love though about this is that I think for the longest time one of the big complaints I heard is that Red Smite is super broken. I think that the good news for all the people who hate Red Smite is that it's now much more balanced because the jungler is just permanently 2 levels slower than you. So
Yeah.
That's how you keep the scales pretty even. When you look at this, there's obviously changes coming on 10.3, putting some experience back into the Krugs, changing things around a little bit. But I'm curious, like, in your as a guy who has a lot of a lot of opinions about jungle, I'm curious what does your ideal jungle look like? Because it sounds like you do see some of the positives in these jungle changes. Once again, not trying to advocate for these jungle changes, but you said like, hey, it makes pathing much more interesting, much more diverse. Like you can take any path you want pretty much to get to level 3, which makes things a lot more creative. What does your ideal jungle look like?
I think you should maybe add a mechanic where you get more XP from enemy jungle camps.
Nice.
I think something like that would make the jungle a lot more exciting. Then you could have these Jarvans where, like Jarvan or Lee Sin, where you can level 2 invade and take their Gromp and you get bonus XP. Or you can have champions like Nidalee and Graves, who are farming junglers, who want to farm, but they can take your camps as well. I think that it would make playing around jungle a lot better in the early game, because you can get your jungler advantages by playing aggressive. And I think that it wouldn't scale too much into late game, because towards mid-late game, you don't really play for the enemy camps as much, unless you're like not really playing for an objective. So I think that adding interesting different mechanics like that would help. So for example, getting less XP from minions, but getting bonus XP from enemy camps. I think something like this would make the jungle like shake it up a bit. And then maybe for season 11, something like that would make it a lot stronger and weaker as well.
But I want to warn you, if you're getting less XP from minions and then your mid laner gets solo killed, you might only get a single level instead of the 2 levels that you were so excited about.
But you still get the gold. Don't tell them about that.
I mean, Yamato, you sound really excited about this, like incentivizing aggressive counter jungling.
Like there was a time where I remember there was this jungle item, the ghost one. Like the trackers, not the trackers knife, but
Poacher's Dirk.
Poacher's Dirk,
There was Poacher's Dirk, which turned into Serrated Dirk, and then there was, I don't remember what the other one. There was another one
it
that
was like a ghosty thing. It gave you more gold if you stole enemies' camps, but I don't think it was more experience. That was good fun, but at the time it was just overshadowed by Purple Smite. Like Purple Smite.
it was
really,
Harvester's
really
Smite or whatever, because it just
you just smited the Raptor,
it was an AOE.
Just one-shot everything. You got mana, you got HP, and it was just really, really busted. So it was completely overshadowed, but I'm with you on the idea of getting rewarded for taking enemy camps. I think we would have a lot of scenarios where the map might be divided in a sense. Like it would encourage people to, like if you're a weaker jungler, like you divide the map, and then if you're stronger jungler, you always look to match. So I think there's a lot of room to kind of experiment. I like it. It's definitely better than this. You know, people are complaining about jungle now. But last year, I felt like junglers were way too OP. I don't know how you felt.
I agree.
Like season 9, junglers were one-shotting everyone. Like they were even level if they played good. Better jungle wins. Now I feel like it's like worse jungler loses. Because like some games now, it's like you have a jungler that he just comes to your lane, he's level 4 and you're level 7, you're like, man, just go away.
Get
What
out
are you
of here.
doing here, man? This is kind of the juxtaposition of it all. Because I want to remind people that Season 9 was not that beautiful in terms of jungling.
Yeah, I think in Season 9, if the jungler gets 3 or 4 kills, it's just a struggle for your jungler. But now it's like, as a jungler, you don't really want to take the kills because no matter how many kills you get in this patch, you're not going to be able to kill the enemy solo lanes no matter what. So you kind of want to give your kills to your solo laners. But in terms of jungle, like ideal jungle, I think this XP thing with the enemy camps is really good. I also think if you want to introduce Tracker's Knife again to like get rid of this red smite dueling thing, just put in some wards for junglers or like give them some kind of vision mechanic. Because right now it's just have wards or have sweeper, that's it. I think some kind of mechanic like that, and then yeah, just more XP, and it would give more incentives to junglers like Elise, for example, to like gank and push out the enemy top and then play for the enemy camps instead of just gank and then dive and then base and then dive and then base and then dive again. So it just gives more, yeah.
I mean, I'm excited about all this. I do want to say that I'm not a member of the design team, and I kind of wish we brought Ender here because Ender usually has really strong opinions and has a bit more of like the behind-the-scenes insight. Because when you describe this to me, like especially as a caster, I love this stuff. Giving junglers more wards, not necessarily, because I remember the heydays. Like that was the peak LCK when you had to have any form of extra wards, whether it was Sightstone or Green Smite or whatever. Not excited about wards, but counter jungling is good. I want a reason to fight more early, because that's what scuttle crabs were supposed to be, right? And it like kind of worked when they were really, really powerful, and then they made them spawn both at the same time, and now it feels like everyone just handshakes on the trade. And then Season 10, they nerfed jungle into the ground, and now it's like, well, we don't want to help you contest Scuttle Crab because we're taking your Raptor camp, and
Yeah.
it's a much better deal.
I mean, there's loads of ways you can go about it, right? Like Yamato was right. You can kind of split the map level 1 then, and then you could just cross map and both junglers get to level 4 evenly. But you could also add like small mechanics where enemy jungle camps don't give bonus XP until minute 4, minute 5, and stuff like this. And you can just play about it, loads of different techniques, maybe like some kind of stacking mechanic where if you kill a certain amount of large monsters, you get like a bonus gold, or you get a ward, or you get, I don't know, something weird. Something like that would be pretty
We
good.
need more bonuses, basically.
Like the poachers thing,
yeah.
the turn into Raid Dark. It was a really good concept, I think. The fact that you get, I think it was 4 enemy camps,
Yeah, I
large
think
monsters.
they buffed it down to 3, like
Or
halfway
yeah,
through the season.
3 large monsters, you get an item. Something like that is kind of interesting. You can play about with that in terms of like maybe not giving an item, maybe giving bonus XP in terms of stacks or bonus gold. I think that's pretty good.
I guess the worry would just be always like if the game just turns too snowbally. I remember back in Season 8, like a few... was it Season 8? I think it was Season 8 when you just got invaded on, and then when you got 3 buffed, you pretty much were out of the game.
Yep.
But I guess you just have to find some kind of balance, because I think still, even though a lot of people in Season 9 complained about catch-up experience, I like the idea of it, because you were kind of... You got back on experience, but the enemy had more gold. And I think that's what it should come down to. I think you should just give junglers more gold, not necessarily more experience, because I think you can find like a neat balance where junglers are in a good spot in terms of XP, because I think that was always the danger in the past.
Yeah, I don't know how catch-up XP worked on numbers, but I think if you could nerf catch-up XP but keep it in the game, I think it was a good concept to have, where if you fall behind in XP, because nowadays if you fall behind in XP and gold, you're just a cannon minion. Whereas if you actually had some kind of levels without the gold, you were still somewhat useful. So catch-up XP, even though it was a bit of a pain, because you're like, wait, we're same level, but I'm 10-0. I think it was a bit too extreme, maybe. I'm not sure exactly how it worked, but maybe just nerfing the catch-up XP a little bit rather than removing it. So the junglers, like, because I remember in Season 9, Season 8, if you're 10-0, the enemy jungler was the same level as you, which was a bit wrong. I think but nowadays, if you're 10-0, the enemy jungler is 5 levels down, which is a bit wrong too. I think having them like maybe 1 or 2 levels down is fine in this kind of like this extreme case. But I think some form of catch-up XP is kind of nice for the game.
It's difficult because it's specific to laners. Like even if you're zoned off farm, the range is so long that you can still pick up XP. And XP and gold are essentially 2 different means to the same end, right? It's all combat power. It's all effective combat power. It's stats, it's abilities, it's whatever. So it does feel like especially bad when you don't get catch-up XP, you don't get extra gold for camps. So every camp that you lose, or like let's say you're denied access to one side of your jungle, just feels that much worse. And then also when you hit mid-game and kind of the standard is now for all of your camps to be taxed by your respective laners.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
It just it already felt impossible, and now it's like you're like going around begging, like, please, sir,
Yeah.
like, don't take my raptors.
The only
Just
camp
this one spawn.
The only camp that junglers can get in mid game is wolves if you're lucky, because both solo lanes on side take your Gromp and Krugs. Then your AD takes red and your mid lane takes blue. So all you've got left is like raptors and wolves. But you know your AD when he has Hurricane just one shots the raptors in front of you, and you're just like, nah, I can't take this.
You're a Jarvan player, and that's all you need to be.
It's
Caedrel.
true.
You said it. Strongest champion in the meta at level 4 for eternity.
Just get my ruby crystals and I'll be fine.
Quick Cinder Hulk. On the subject of jungle, I'm curious in taking camps. I'm curious like what the dynamic is for you on Excel specifically this season playing around jungle, because obviously last you got to play in the glory days of last season where jungle was maybe a bit too strong, and you had like a pretty solid season overall, and now you're kind of making this shift where how much communication actually goes into this thing like sharing camps? Is it just an unvoiced thing? Is it like you're like, hey, take my raptors, this is the right choice? Or is it just like you look down and your raptors are gone and this is just the understanding of the team?
Well, in Season 9, it was like, yeah, the camps were kind of important for jungle, but Season 9 Sejuani was OP and we were first picking it, so it didn't really matter, the camps still. So it was kind of similar to nowadays, but I don't think there's communication in terms of camps. It's just my carry is just kind of yoink it while I'm not looking. You know, I'm in base and then I'm running out of base and I'm like looking at the minimap and there's no camps up. Okay, I must have taken them earlier. My bad. And then I realized, like, wait a second, they're not up for like another 2 minutes. I normally take the camps, but if they say like, oh, I have to get IE, I have to get Rabadons, I'm just like, just take it. All I'm getting from it is a ruby crystal, so just crack on. But yeah, just nowadays on the jungle patch, it's not as important to take camps after level 10, level 11, if you can reach that level. I think that most junglers get their XP from, so the way the game works is mid-prio is super important, right? So
Yeah.
junglers just go with 80 carry and support to push mid-wave. I think that's where most of your XP comes from. And if you're lucky, you can get a Scuttle Crab. It's like a bonus jackpot. That's about it.
I think it's so, I think Gromp and Krugs, I think even in Season 9, it was like accepted that solo laners took it. Like I realize now why a lot of the junglers in the LPL and the LCK were constantly showing on the midwave, because here in Europe what Fnatic and G2 were doing, they were like hiding in fog permanently because they kind of could. But now I think just because junglers need to show on midwave just to have some kind of sense of experience, I think that also slows down the game. Because I think Fnatic and G2, like Season 9, always in fog, ganked you on side, made things happen. And now you just have to be like, oh, I need this. You kind of like a beggar in the mid
You're like
lane.
watching the Rise full clear the wave. You're like, oh, you need help? He's like, no, I can one-shot the wave. You're like, oh, no, you definitely
you definitely
need
just
help.
queue that wave.
Oh, what? That's so crazy.
Oh, sorry, dude.
Whoops, fat fingered the smite. There goes the cannon
You took
creep.
my creeps?
Oh,
Yeah, it's just
sorry.
an accident.
It's just 80 gold. You're fine. You can get it back off Raptors in a few minutes.
Yeah, so like I think jungle has two different ways you can play it. I mean, either the first one is you stand on fog, or you stand on the midwave and take the XP, or you like Hail Mary gank a side lane and try to kill them and like take the tower on that side, or like dive them. If you're playing like Elise or Jarvan, like level 8, 9, you can just try and dive the enemy solo lane in a 1-3-1 setup, and then you can get a kill maybe, and then you can push out the wave, and then it's bonus XP instead of just the midwave. So yeah, that's about it. Really.
What was it? Take a major. Well, you said it when you're on the cast chest with this. Like, take a major objective or get a pentakill.
Yeah,
That's the
so
only way you're getting enough XP.
exactly. You can catch up in XP by just taking Nash or getting a penta. I think that's the best ways.
Which is what junglers should be trying to do.
Yeah.
Taking Nash, getting a penta, probably not. You did say yourself that you should never be taking kills.
Yeah, never take kills, but I mean, if you get a team fight and you 5-0 them, and you push out all waves, you're automatically 2 levels up just from that. And then if you get Baron as well, it's a free 1.5 levels almost. So yeah, that's where the real money's at in jungle for XP. But yeah.
It's time to run TP jungle.
Yeah, I remember someone did that last year, Smite TP, on like Skarner or something. I can't remember what it was. Oh, it was Spellbook they used, I remember.
Okay, Spellbook. I was going
Spellbook,
to say,
yeah.
oh yeah, wait. Was that Origin who ran like 5 Spellbooks?
I remember playing Urgot last split as well, and I was playing Spellbook. And I used to play it in scrims, and it
my
was
God.
really good.
I forgot about your.
I had like 80% win rate in scrims with it, and I would
forgot that was you.
I would go Spellbook and gank the enemy solo lane with my ult, and then just kill them and TP to Nash. It was the craziest thing ever.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I remember what it looked like on stage.
Yeah, on
too.
stage, it was just a massacre.
I think it was a scrim god type of thing, because
It
we were
was.
scared of it. We were really, really scared of
Yeah,
it. I
it
think we
was
were scrimming self-made man, and he was just like just 1v9ing on, because like you reach level 9 on Urgot and you had the perma W on, and then it was like just one-shot all the camps.
And the 2v2 was unlosable. You know, if you have Syndra Urgot and you hit the stun on Syndra, and then Urgot ult just flies out the bush and Syndra ults him, it's just a one-shot. There's nothing you can do.
Just sounds like budget Karthus. That's what it
Kind of. And then like I would get to level 6 and just have my Ignite Urgot with Red Smite and ult, and then Lee Sin Qs on me, and then just flip him and one-shot him.
The golden days.
This is all right. This is absolutely to round out this segment before we get to I think the real meat of the top 5 junglers, about talking who's on top, what makes them good. I do want to know, do you have any wild solo queue picks, Urgot-esque solo queue picks that you can share with the people at home?
I think Dark Harvest champs are really strong in solo queue, because even though you don't have as much XP nowadays, kills are really important. So champions like Kha'Zix are pretty fine. I think Echo is a really good jungler right now in solo queue. You just get Dark Harvest and get some kills, and you can actually 1v9. I think Talia is really good. I think Elise is pretty good. Lee Sin. I think Lee Sin is the best.
Give me something edgy. I don't want to hear a Lee Sin come.
Edgy champs.
Echo was good.
Yesterday I was playing Cho'Gath and Lulu Jungle, just trying those out. I think Lulu. My thought process behind Lulu was, if you have Soraka top and Lulu Jungle, and you're used, like I imagine Rek'Sai, right? Like a level 8 Rek'Sai, it's just useless in teamfights. But if you have a level 8 Lulu jungle with Red Smite and Ardent, maybe you're actually useful. But I haven't come to any conclusion.
We should cut this.
Cut right here. We can't let the scrim pick say.
But keep this.
Don't.
No, but honestly, I played in solo queue. It was trash. So I'm not playing that.
All right, you've led them off the scent.
But there's no outstanding solo queue junglers. I think everything's pretty trash, apart from Lee Sin. It's really good. It's fun.
There you go. That's the state of the jungle. Everything's pretty trash apart from Lee Sin.
It's true.
After the break, we're going to break down the LEC's top junglers. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're trying something new. We tried Yamato ASMR. We're now going to try, we'll just call it improv. So I'm going to provide a situation, and you two are going to improv. This could absolutely be a disaster, but like I think the worst thing that it can be is mediocre. So if you're going to go in, just go in, boys. That's all I can ask for. So I will be your dramatic radio announcer, and I will take you into the situation. Here we are in the mid lane. 2 players at opposing ends, both in need of experience and gold. Yamatocannon, a mid laner. Caedrel, his jungler. And scene.
Yo, Caedrel, help me push this wave out. The enemy has TP.
Okay, let me just throw my Q. Oops, I just took all your... Yes.
No, my base is gonna be worse, man.
Oh no, I took all the creeps. It's mine now.
Don't run away, though. He's freezing, help me.
My raptors just respawned. I need them now.
No, my lane is over. I'm taking these raptors from you.
Sucks for you. I'll just help you push the next one.
All right, man.
All right, that's perfect. I realize I'm not supposed to say scene at the start. I'm supposed to say scene at the end for learning. Scene. And scene. Oh, beautiful acting. That's everything that we could possibly hope for. Well done, boys. So when we invited you on, the first thing that we love lists here, as the people at home have noticed, and we wanted a list that was less likely to burn us than our tier list, where we put Schalke A, which is clearly about this 3rd degree burns right there. We have burned ourselves as bad as we can be burned. So we thought top 5 junglers feels a little bit safer. So as far as lists goes, we're going to be referencing my list today. All 3 people have lists or close lists, depending on, like, everyone knows who their top 5 are. Ordering's different. I know who my top 5 are, and I know the order they're in. I'm an overachiever, so you guys can flame me, you can roast me, but I imagine that we're all going to be in the same general area. It feels semi-defined right now in the LEC. But before we get into my list, I want to talk to you both just briefly about what makes a good jungler in your guys' eyes. Like, what do you think the role needs as a baseline? What makes really good junglers? If you can think of examples of people who have been exceptional for those reasons, share them. Because
I think mechanics, the easy one, and then just efficiency of time. I think just identifying where you're supposed to be on the map is always the question. It's like if you pause the game at any point in time, where is the jungler? Is he in the right spot? Is he playing for the right thing? I think it is difficult sometimes to gauge how good a jungler is because it is very reliant on how good the laners are. But I think there are some cases where it is very, very clear. I think, for example, with Selfmade, with SK, I think it was very easy to say, okay, this guy can identify where he's supposed to be. He's hovering the right lanes. He's getting the mid 2v2 prio when he's supposed to. He's making it very difficult to track him. And there are some cases where it's more difficult, like the Fnatic case of last year. So I think, for me, efficiency of time and mechanics.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think mechanics mainly comes from SoloQ. I mean, you can just take a jungler from the top 10 in SoloQ and just know that his mechanics are pretty on point. And I mean, the two things in SoloQ are just mechanics and just having a good brain and just knowing where to get some free kills. But
Spot the Inter, huh?
yeah, spot the Inter, exactly. And locate the Inter and just target him. But I think when it comes to competitive, it's hard to tell, like Yamato said, what really makes a good jungler, because you can have a really good team with really good laners and a bad jungler, but you wouldn't really notice it because the lanes will make up for it by saying, hey, come here, or like telling him what to do in a sense. But a good jungler is someone who can just think for himself and just kind of plan out or work out where he needs to be on the map at what time. A jungler who's efficient and is really good at not falling behind. So I think there's some junglers who, when they fall behind, they just don't know what to do. But even when you're behind this jungle, you can still have impact. And I think junglers that know how to push the game forwards in terms of when to take objectives and what places to be like playing around and understanding win conditions and stuff like that. So yeah.
I mean, for me, it sounds a lot like I think the one thing that I identify strongly with there is that the difficulty of kind of figuring out who is a good jungler, and I think that's something that we suffer with in Europe a lot because we have the Fnatic and G2s of the world, and if you're a jungler on one of those teams, you pretty much always look like you're a top 5 jungler by default. Now that's no flame to Jankos or Selfmade or even Broxa in the past, but it's very hard to dissect outside of like clearly in plays who is actually bearing the burden of communicating, who is actually doing that. But when we look at it, to me, jungle feels like one of the most difficult roles on like an intelligence level outside of mid lane, I guess. I'm trying to find a word here. Difficult in a big brain sense, which is definitely not
big brain sense.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like the most cerebral. Like I hate that word, but it's the most role.
Like critically thinking role.
Yeah, critically thinking role. Yeah. Because I think that like laners have to understand a lane matchup, right? Junglers have to understand a jungle matchup, but then junglers need to understand also what each individual lane needs. And while I think that there is some of that for top lane, right? Knowing to TP if you're playing GP, knowing like when you need to ult, why you need to ult. It feels like outside of mid, jungle is the role where you have to think about the map state more than anywhere else.
Yeah, I think jungle in the early game is kind of subjective. You can kind of do whatever you want and just make sure your team gets ahead. But when it comes to like mid to late game, it's very objective. You have to play around certain lanes and just be very, like you said, like thinking critically on where you really need to be and where to put resources in a sense. So yeah, I think that's what makes a good jungler. So like you said, it's kind of hard to find if you're a good jungler on a good team because it all comes down to communication. So if the jungler's talking the most and he's on the right place at the right time, you could argue that he's a good jungler. But if he doesn't talk that much and he's just a mechanically gifted player, just following his team, then it's kind of hard to say whether he's good or not because he brings different kind of things to the team.
For sure. I think I have to say one thing though. When it comes to junglers, I put a bigger hint of responsibility on them because like if you have a 3v3 on bottom or a 2v2 on top, like if your bot lane doesn't know how to force it or how to prepare it, it makes it harder. But as a jungler, you can like be the arch that kind of just overtakes it and takes charge of it. Mm-hmm. While as a laner, you can't put a gun to your jungler's head and say, come. That happens sometimes, sure. But I think the responsibility falls a bit heavier in the jungler's hands.
You just lay like, look at all this juicy creep experience, Caedrel. You could be level 5. Doesn't level 5 sound nice?
Go there. Yeah, I think jungler, like Yamato said, is a huge catalyst independent on what happens on the map. And I think that you have to identify where you want to be on the map and where you want to make things happen. And then, yeah. So, for example, if bot or mid is an Armageddon, then you have to be around there. Yes. And if top lane is Soraka versus Sona, then you don't have to go there.
Oh, man. Why do you got to give the people the preview of what next week is going to look like?
I mean, if you've been seeing like some solo queues, like everyone's playing Soraka now. So I don't know what Wunder's done to the ladder.
Oh, no. Yeah, it's interesting being in a region with G2 and all you other, call it creative players. But let's get into the list. Normally we do like 5 to 1, but I think 1 is probably the easiest, so I thought we would start there and kind of work our way down and see who makes the cut into the top 5. So number 1 for me, none other than G2's Jankos. I feel like while we can look back at Worlds and talk about how much his Qiyana was atrocious, for the most part he's incredibly consistent. He is a player who always feels like he goes into game with a plan. He knows what he wants to be doing. And he's also just very good at adjusting where he needs to go. Now, like all G2 members, it's hard to tell exactly how much like how big of a piece of the puzzle he is, because we just know G2 as a unit are incredibly strong. But to me, Jankos just on paper appears to be the strongest, most consistent jungler that we have in the league.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that playing against Jankos, you can notice that he's hard to shut down, hard to snowball against, and he never falls behind. And he's always where he needs to be most of the time. And he has a really wide champion pool. He can kind of play whatever he wants, from like Olaf to Kindred to Gragas, anything really. I think he is, consistently the best jungler in EU. And I think that you can look at historically as well. He's won MSI, he's won quite a few LEC titles now. And yeah, he always has been a pretty good jungler, I think, so he's the best.
I remember from working with Jankos back in Season 5 that even back then, his eye for setting up ganks was really unmatched in comparison to anyone else I've worked with. Like the First Blood King might sound like a meme at this point, but it
came from
really
somewhere.
Is true.
Yeah.
And the Rocket days, he always figured out ways how to go really, really hard in the early game. And this was an issue for us because in scrims, we won every game in 10 minutes. So when we were on stage and everyone plays like crumpled up under the turret, we didn't know how to play mid-game and so forth. So I put him on Nunu duty. But I wanted to point out that I put Xerxes ahead of Jankos coming into the split on my tier list, simply based off of the world's performance and how weak G2 have been in the early game for such a long time. Even in the series against, I think in the series against Fnatic, he did super, super well. I think he was by far the better jungler in comparison to Broxa. But I was a bit worried in regards to G2, especially with their first week performance when it came to their early game. But I think that's been improving. Second week now against OG, I think he proved me heavily wrong. So I'm 100% on the Jankos first place train again.
Yeah, it was a little tough for old Xerxes once the Gragas and the Jarvan were gone. It seemed a bit more difficult to impact the early game. One thing I want to end on Jankos is just because he's such a historic player, and you both have, kind of as long as you've been a part of the scene, you've watched this guy, you've seen this guy. What changed for Jankos to make him the best? Because for a long time, remember when Trick joined, he was on kind of that was the H2K era of Jankos, and it felt like he was always on the outside looking in, and Trick was the guy on Graves, on Gragas, making highlight reels. It was him and Perks dominating the league. And up until some of the international performances and the final moments of Trick before he left and then eventually came back, it always felt like Jankos was close, but not quite there. So what changed to like really elevate Jankos to be
Teammates?
uncontested number one? Is it just that simple? Was he always this good and it was just now he's just on a good team?
I think he's been consistently very, very good, as Caedrel mentioned. I think the time when Trick came into the scene, like I remember the first split, Trick blew my mind. Like scrimming against Trick was like, holy Jesus. And then Spirit also came in at the time and they were just like next level. And Europe was relatively weak at the time and G2 together with Perks Trick 2v2 mid just took the world by storm. And then G2 was consistently dominant over and over for 2 years straight and it was hard to break that. And I think with Jankos now, even on G2 when he was on Brom duty, there were times where they were really, really good 2v2 mid as well. So I think that was already the beginning of the potential there, because the first spring split, before they blew up in summer with the Yanan Wunder roster, they were actually, like Jankos was looking super, super strong. And then Brom duty, and then it looked worse again. And maybe that leaves like a scar in everyone's memory.
I think maybe there's two factors. I think what Yamato said is true. I think teammates is a big deal for jungle. I think it's something that makes you stronger as a player. It makes you learn more, and it makes you have more options if they're just playing better in a sense. I think something else which is really important for junglers, which I think experience is a huge deal when it comes to jungle. So he's been playing since, season 4, season 5, something like this?
Something like this, yeah.
So he's obviously played like almost 5 seasons worth of jungle, so he's been through everything. So he kind of knows the insides and outsides of the counters of everything, the jungle, pathings and stuff like this. And even though the game does change and develop, some of these things can always be brought back. And I think that the creativity has always been there for him. And yeah, I just think the consistency along with the experience and his mechanics are still really good. Yeah. So he just kind of ticks every box in a sense.
Yeah, and I just want to say that, like, as a final thing before we move on to my number 2 junglers, that I think mid lane is crazy because of like the huge champion pool. Top lane suffers from a similar thing where the meta changes. Bot lane's a little less volatile. I'll say there's like 2 metas. There's range support metas. There's melee support metas. Your AD carry has a dash or doesn't have a dash, and that's about the only 2 metas that we ever see, right? But for jungle, it's not the meta of champions is actually also, I would say, overall historically pretty stagnant. But what I will say is that it's the only place where your role essentially gets reworked every year, and all the pathing, all the things that you've learned, the things that are important change so consistently. And so it's impressive when a player can, I think, stay top 3 in the jungle role, especially through the evolution of Europe. And Europe, let's be honest, like kind of exploding in terms of like skill ceiling and like the level that we can show at international events over the last 2 to 3 years. So shout out to Jankos. Number 2 on my list is Xerxes. There are concerns on my end that maybe he's just a Gragas abuser, and that's why he looks so fantastic on stage. I've been hearing that recently, but this is a guy who, when he entered the scene, I think was like kind of the crazy innovator, and it feels like over the years has kind of toned down on the crazy, can still innovate, but has been learning much more. I think became much more of a leader and a strong voice during his time on Splice when he kind of had to be that voice, and just seems to be on this Origin roster, outside of the G2 game, just ridiculously consistent, and to me feels like, worthy of the number 2 slot.
I agree. I think Xerxes is very consistent. I think at Worlds he had a really good performance against SKT. His Rek'Sai was pretty good, and his play overall at Worlds was really good when I watched it. I think he has a few weaknesses, but like Jankos has no weaknesses, I think, in a sense. But I think Xerxes does have a few. He's really consistent, but I think sometimes his early games are a bit iffy, shaky. Sometimes he has maybe some champ pool issues as well, I think. But I think overall, like looking generically at Jankos, I think Xerxes, I think he's a really strong jungler. I think he's played a long time as well. He's got a lot of experience. And I think over the years, he's become more of a voice, I think. Maybe when he started, I don't think he talked as much. But now I can see him in games. He's always talking, keeping up the communication. And yeah, he's always where he needs to be. He's pretty good.
I'm curious. You're like listing off flaws, and I feel like you've agreed with me that Xerxes is good, but do you agree that Xerxes is the second best jungler?
Yeah, I think he's the second best.
You think he's the second best? You're willing to agree with me?
I actually am willing to.
Okay, all right, nice.
So
for the record, off the air, you were like, I don't know. Number 1, easy. Number 2 through 5. All right, we've convinced him.
Yeah.
I missed the spice. I missed the Warwicks and the Zacks. And
I missed
Ivans.
not the Warwick so much, because waiting for him to either get 2 kills and get a Tiamat at 4 minutes or not have Tiamat and the game would slow down. But I do miss the Iverns.
Yeah.
I miss the Rumble in the jungle.
It's kind of terrible now in the current jungle, though.
Kind of awful, yes.
So that kind of blows. Like for Ivan, it's the jungle changes were disastrous, because when the spawn times were big, that was perfect, because you kind of like put flowers there and you plant your stuff, and then you can wait, and that's better. And now with like
You're literally a garden tender. You just do laps around the jungle.
now when you take the raptors, it's kind of depressing. You're gonna wait for like nothing, you know. It's like it's a bad harvest. It's sad.
But all these like wacky champs that he has, like Rumble, Ivern, Warwick, I think he has like really good pocket picks. But I think that he lacks, for example, on Lee Sin. I think he's not a confident Lee Sin player. He's not like Jankos or Inspired or Selfmade or me, who just play Lee Sin non-stop in SoloQ. And for example, I think his Jarvan is also a bit shaky. But I think outside of that, like Elise, Gragas, and Rek'Sai, and even pocket picks, he's got a really good champ pool. I just think that there's some weaknesses in it.
Yeah, and I think that is a pretty big deal. Like, I think it's easy to say, like, hey, he does a lot of things well and kind of gloss over that, but those are key fundamental champions. And like, if you ever are top jungler versus top jungler, as we saw, you know, kind of like Xerxes versus Jankos and the G2 versus Origin, and shutting you down is or can be as easy as banning away Jarvan, banning away Gragas, limiting some of those picks, and forcing you into a Lee Sin or a Rek'Sai, and kind of limiting a lot of your impact. That's a huge deal. Yes, it won't matter if he's battling a 6th, a 7th, and 8th place jungler. It won't be that important. But when you're top team against top team, that's hugely deciding factor. Because Lee Sin can be the highlight montage champion, or he can be the I didn't get 2 kills in the early game, I'm a walking kick. And
make or break.
Yeah, it's just nothing. It can be nothing.
You're a walking kick, because like Rek'Sai is a walking tremor sense.
Yeah,
it's true. Rek'Sai's even more
Everyone's a walking X.
Yeah.
in the
Past an
jungle
early
right
game.
now.
Yeah. Well, unless you're like, if you're Jarvan or Gragas, you get to be a walking like 3 things. You can be an
Yes,
EQ, you can be an R, Gragas can be a body slam and
a bit
a
of a
cast.
tank.
Yeah, be a tank a
With
little bit.
Rek'Sai is just a squishy. It's when I play Rek'Sai in team fights, and even when I'm ahead, you're just trying to snipe people with Q so you can finish them off with ult. That's about it. If you E in and you get hit by a Nautilus hook, you're just one shot.
You're living the fantasy of being the shark. You just only finish. You have to wait for there to be blood in the water. You're not
Exactly.
allowed to do anything till that point.
Yeah,
You
that's
just
a
have to
good
sit in the
analogy.
back of the team fight, maybe knock up a single person. I don't miss old Rek'Sai, but when I watch new Rek'Sai in late game team fights, I do miss old Rek'Sai. Multi-person knockup, very
the
strong.
split push Cinderhook Rek'Sai with Titanic Hydra just pushing sides, and if there's a team fight, I'll ult in, guys.
It was so toxic. Number 3 on my list, and this is where it gets hard. 1 and 2 felt really solid to me, but from this point on, it's like really up in the air. Number 3, I gave it to Selfmade on Fnatic currently, but last year I feel like it was such. There's a lot of junglers who have consistently played on like pretty good teams. I feel like Xerxes being one of them. Like, yes, we can talk about Unicorns of Love struggling. Yes, we can talk about Splice struggling, but they were always pretty good, right? Whereas this SK roster that Selfmade played on was a bit of a mess, to be honest. And Selfmade was the shining light of that team. And I think I give him a lot of that credibility, obviously kicking off with a game where he gets to abuse Sejuani, as we talked about, just solo kill Illusion basically in the middle of a fight, really looked fantastic. And the first weeks with Fnatic have been a bit scattered, but I do think that we saw a lot of the things that made him good, even in their first game, where while they ultimately couldn't convert into a win, or the game versus Origin, like his Qiyana he burned 2 flashes in like the first 4 minutes of the game. Sadly, it didn't convert past that, but you saw that he was like constantly moving. He was where he needed to be. He was consistently making plays for a few minutes. It did slow down after that when Reckless had no way to get target access and the entire team relied on a wombo combo. But I think Selfmade, while he, to me doesn't have the consistency of Xerxes, is still the thing that I look for in an early game jungler. And for me, when I look at junglers, early game is pretty much everything.
Yeah, I can sort of agree on the third place. The thing I have with Selfmade is he's a really strong jungler. His mechanics are probably one of the best in Europe. I have to agree, in the top 3 mechanics, he's probably one of the best. The thing I see with Selfmade is like that Qiyana game, when he doesn't get ahead, like he's not 2 or 3-0 on his carry champion, it doesn't look like he has as much impact as, like, for example, Jankos and Xerxes when they're 0-0-0. And I think he's sometimes maybe a bit like explosive in what he does, so he goes for these crazy plays, or for example in the Gragas game against Schalke, he just like randomly runs bot after losing his top camps and gets a gank, and it works. So he has these creative ganks, and he's really smart about when and where to gank, and that's what makes him like super high elo in SoloQ most of the time in every season. But I think that sometimes when he's not ahead, he struggles a bit, and then that's the only criticism I have of Selfmade. But in terms of the last year SK lineup, when they made it to playoffs, it was quite surprising. I think he played really well. But even with Trick, maybe I think the roster is, even though it is weak, I don't think it's the weakest roster. Trick, I think, is a different player than Selfmade in terms of aggression and just consistency. I think Trick can maybe slot in a little bit, but Selfmade was, when you slot in a super like high tempo, aggressive early game jungler into that team, it's sometimes hit or miss because your lanes aren't as strong. But I have to agree. Yeah, top 3 is
You say top 3. You say top 3 mechanics, but you're I mean, you can just say like.
Yeah, no, I think he's definitely top 5, 100%.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, okay, so that's good. But
I think Inspired is also super good.
Ooh.
And
he's also on my list. Spoiler.
Yeah, I think Selfmade Inspired is like the 3, 4, 5. I don't know which order to put it in, because I think you can arrange it in different ways. You can say in terms of mechanics, I think Selfmade is 3rd for sure. I think in terms of consistency, I mean, you could argue Inspired and me because of Selfmade has had some good games last year, but it's yet to see if he is consistent overall, because even if you can't make plays on a champ, for example, on Qiyana, I didn't watch the full game, but maybe there's ways to like play for team fights or just play defensive or just fall a bit behind. But yeah.
So let's actually open this up then, and just like kind of add more names to the discussion, because you said 3, 4, 5, and I have the same 3, 4, 5. Monitors 3 is Selfmade, 4 is Inspired, and 5 is Caedrel. And Yamato, I kind of want to weigh in before we start talking about each of these names. If there's anyone that you think should have been on this list that wasn't on this list, if you think there's anyone who's like just outside this list.
Honestly, no, not that I can think of. Like the only person that maybe stands out is like maybe Shadow, but he got killed, and it's like it's too soon to say. It's way too soon. I agree with the sentiment that like time makes like a jungler. Like do they stand the test of time? And now with I think all three of you that we mentioned, Selfmade, Inspired, and you, Caedrel, it's like this year is a very, very defining year. Because last year Selfmade was on SK, Inspired was on the Rogue roster that was on the up and up. You guys were also on the up and up in the end, didn't make to the playoffs, but you guys were still improving quite drastically coming into the end. I feel like this year is like the true test. So it's like I'm with the opinion that 3, 4, 5 can be any of you three, but I don't think anyone else outside of this belongs here.
Yeah, I think at the moment, I think Selfmade Inspired third is probably the best. I think, like Yamato said, by the end of the year, we'll see where the teams are at and whether Selfmade does slot into Fnatic well, whether this Rogue roster will succeed, whether we're going to be a good team, hopefully. But I think outside of the top 5, it's really hard to judge because Trix coming off a decent year with Schalke, I would say. Maybe some inconsistency here and there. Not the greatest, not the worst. And then now he's on the SK lineup, which is a lot worse than the Schalke lineup was. So it's hard to see where anything can happen there. And I think there's 3 rookies, so it's impossible to judge them right off the bat. But I do think out of the 3, I think Razork kind of stands out a little bit for me. He's playing against 2 of them so far. I haven't played against Skeens. I think Razork was not bad. But Shadow, yeah, he got killed by my mid lane level 2, so it's hard to say. And then I think Gilius has had some poor performances, so it's hard to rate the other 5 in that sense. So I think that's why this top 5 is kind of like there's a line in between.
Yeah, I to be fair, I think that Trick hasn't looked the best. He's had some pretty meh games. Gilius has had some pretty bad games, and there are 3 rookies. So I think 2 of those people are easy to rate. They're clearly outside the top 5, and I think the other 3, it's like, hey, let's give them some time before we put them there. Because it's not like Trick and Gilius have not been around. Like, we know what those guys look like. And I'm hopefully for both of them that they can kind of improve and step up. But focusing back in on 3, 4, 5, now we hit Selfmade. Inspired is a name I want to talk about because last year I had, Frostguard and Vedius, like, talking to me about this Rogue roster, like, oh man, Inspired's so smart. He's such a cerebral pather. And all I saw was like, all right, he's playing Olaf. He's doing Olaf things. But to me, like, I'm always the guy who loves the players who are making plays, who are getting kills, who are making things happen. So while I could appreciate that Inspired might be in the right place at the right time, he wasn't always the flashiest jungler. So I'm curious what your guys' read is on Inspired. Because he's obviously had, since I've looked back at him, that was like starting of last summer, he's obviously had a big leap in improvement, but I want to kind of gauge where you guys think that he's at.
Like my impression of Inspired, you correct me if I'm wrong, because I think I would value your opinion more on this. My impression is that, like maybe the issue with Rogue in general, sometimes when you're playing against the best of the best, if you're in a position in the game, there are some risks that you need to take. For example, maybe you have to sit in this bush, and that's the gamble you're going to take. You're going to lose your bot side camps or something like this for it, but maybe that's the gamble you need to do in order to like increase your chances of winning instead of like waiting for a later moment where your percentages are going to be lower. I haven't seen Inspired taking like those big risks. Like, okay, right now the game state is this. If we don't do this now, we're going to lose the game later. And I think when you're playing against a G2 or a Fnatic, then this is what you need to analyze. But I think this might be like a bigger issue for Rogue overall, but this is something I've seen and what comes to my mind when I think of Inspired, because I think he's very consistent, very smart in terms of where he needs to be, but doesn't do that like little extra in positions of the game where Rogue might be lacking.
Yeah, I kind of see, I agree. I think Inspired's the kind of person who is not going to lose you the game, but he's not going to like win you the game. He's not going to take a risk by like being really aggressive. He's always going to choose the defensive play just to make sure the game stays even. Like he's not going to go for a risky Herald or like a risky bot dive. He'll never take like a 70-30 or a 60-40 chance. He'll always just go for the defensive play, but this is not always a bad thing. I think it's always that kind of outlines his consistency, because if you never take the risk, you're never behind. So that just leads to consistency. But I think against top teams like Origin, Fnatic, and us maybe, and then G2, the top 5 teams in a sense, you kind of have to take risks sometimes. So I think when they do face against G2 and stuff like this, if you do just play defensive and just keep the game in an even state, you're just going to get rolled eventually by teams like G2. And I think against bottom tier teams, it's fine to play defensively because you know your players are better. So I think against Vitality, they had like Pantheon Elise, and they were just kind of punish and drive, trying to dive. And he just kept covering every dive because he knew that we're a better team. I'll just stop their plays from happening, and then my Azir will kill everyone.
Yeah, I've never
So-
seen. There was that game.
That's how it went. It was good. It was good play though.
It was. I mean, it was. They kind of just waited to win the game.
Yeah.
But I watched. You go from watching like 4 forced dives onto Finn to Finn solo killing Cabo Shard
Yeah.
with 2 armor items, and you're like, I see. This was a game of League of Legends.
But I feel like if you kind of swap the teams and put G2 with that draft,
Yeah.
I think the defensive play has to be done in a sense, but I think you're still going to get rolled because you're not making anything happen on the map, and then your solo lanes are just killing everyone. So against Wunder perks, I don't know if that's going to happen as much. So yeah.
There's 2 things that I want to hit before we let you go, Caedrel. One is you and where you see yourself. And if you're feeling introspective, talk to us about what you think your strengths are, what you think your weaknesses are. And the last thing, and you can hit these in either order you want. Excel is top. You just like Excel, top 5 team. You snuck it in there.
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, you got your rogues and your origins and your fanatics and your Excels. You're just like, bam. Currently 2-2. You gotta give me a little bit of something. Why is Excel a top 5 team?
I think that in the offseason, we did really well in the offseason. I think that most teams did pretty bad in the offseason, I'm not going to lie. Either they took risks, like Vitality and Misfits took huge risks. Not Vitality, Mad Lions and Misfits took huge risks by going 5 rookies on both squads, so I'll exclude them. I think, for example, teams like Vitality, that team got weaker, in my opinion. I think Mowgli Jizuke was a pretty good duo where, sometimes they had you by the and they were like pushing in mid, and Mowgli would just walk into your jungle level 2, and they were like really at your
We
throat.
called it psychopathing?
Yeah.
Because you just look over and Mowgli's contesting the first camp as
Yeah.
Olaf. You're like, why is he here?
So sometimes it would lose them the game, but sometimes you have to kind of dissect them to win the game. Whereas this version of Vitality, even though we haven't played against them, it looks like they're just sitting there, and they are trying to play Pantheon Elise, but the dives aren't clean, the lanes aren't strong. There's no real threat. It's just like a puppy dog instead of like a bulldog. So Vitality, I feel like, got weaker. I think Schalke overall is weaker as well. I think losing Upset Ignar kind of hurt that team, and Trick was actually really well with Ignar, I think, working pretty well. So I just think overall teams got weaker and we just got stronger. I think our bot lane is a lot stronger. I think Mickey's a lot more comfortable, so you can see him popping off. And Xpec's just a rock, so he's always doing well. And I think that looking at our 4 games so far, I think the Rogue game, we took 6 towers and we were doing really good macro, but we just ran it down in a team fight. And then in the Misfits game, we don't talk about it. But I feel like we're a top 5 team right now. I wouldn't say top 5 is in like top of the top 5.
Yeah,
I'd say like 4th, 5th maybe.
Yeah.
I think Rogue is maybe a step above ahead of us. And I think Fnatic, Origin and G2 are top 3. But I think Rogue has a lot of potential to be in that top 5, and I think we do too, in that top 3, sorry. And we can contest for it. I wouldn't say as of right now we're anywhere close, but we can try our best. So.
That's cool. I mean, the thing then the first question that I asked you is like, where do you see yourself in this Excel making the top 3 puzzle? Talk to us about Caedrel, because you've had insight on everyone else. You're like, bam, is it going to make you play? Is it win the game, lose the game? Self-made needs his snowballs. Or say, yeah, he's like. I forgot what you said about Cersei. I'm not gonna lie. It's been 8 minutes. I got the attention span of a goldfish. But who is Caedrel as a player?
I think I'm a very vocal person. Like in the game, I'm speaking a lot, trying to get conversations going, and just in terms of tracking enemy jungler and what I want to do on the map, I'm very, very vocal about it, and it's very set in stone on what I'm doing. I think my champion pool's pretty good. I think that you can't really feels like I can play anything on stage really. I have comfort with anything. So if my team's like, oh, we have to go jungle 4-5 on the pick phase, I'm like, yeah, sure, it's fine. I think I'm fine taking risks. I think I do go for some aggressive plays, but I also am fine taking the defensive plays. It's hard to. I think the hardest part about the player is to find your own weaknesses, because once you can criticize yourself, then you'll become a great player. And that's what I'm trying to do, find my weaknesses. I think sometimes I struggle with like going for hyper aggressive plays, and sometimes I struggle with like some team fights. Maybe I misplay a little bit here and there. So like in the Misfits game, when I was playing Jarvan, I went a bit too deep sometimes in the team fights. But yeah, I think right now I'm quite comfortable where I am. I think last year was a fine year, even though we came 9th and 10th. It was the most disappointing year ever. I think with my individual play, I felt okay. I didn't feel like hugely disappointed by myself, but I felt like I was doing fine. But this year I want to really show up, and I think I have the resources around me to do so. I think our team is pretty strong, and I think if we do make playoffs this year, I just want to play really well and just shine, hopefully, as a team.
As one final thing, this is something that Yamada, you kind of brought up yesterday when we were talking about having Caedrel on the show, that I think is like a final question to close this out is, we talk a lot about already about the people that have been here for a long time. But Caedrel, you kind of been here for a long time. Now your mid lane career, admittedly, not as successful as your jungle career has been. But do you put yourself in a camp with Jankos when it comes to that seniority, that experience? How does your mid lane experience kind of add up with your jungle experience? Or do you still feel like, while you are a much more veteran player than a lot of these players like Selfmade or Inspire, do you feel like because you're new to the jungle role that you put yourself in a similar camp with them?
Well, I think I started in the pro scene, as in terms of LCS, with Schalke when we qualified to LCS, which was 2017. 2017. So I guess it's been about 3 years now that I've been around. One of those years was mid and me just running it. So that wasn't good.
Canceled Malzahar ult, one of my favorite plays of all time.
We don't talk about it. I think I came to terms with my laning phase is never going to be as good as Caps or Perks or anyone like that. So that's why I role swapped in the first place. And I think I'm a very vocal player, so that's why I like the jungle role more. I think playing mids has helped me understand the waves a lot more. So I can see a mid wave or a top wave or a bot wave. I know exactly what it's going to do. And I think some junglers are a bit unsure. And I know a lot about matchups in mid as well. So I know which mid lane matchups are AFK farming and which ones are Armageddon. So I know when to be around mid most of the time. And I think that's what helps a lot with working with the mid lane on my team, because I can talk about matchups with him and we can have discussions about when we can move together and stuff like this. But I think in terms of the question of whether I'm in Jankos' kind of area, I think nowhere close in terms of experience. I mean, that guy's been to Worlds multiple times. He's won titles. He's played on the biggest stages possible. I don't think I've played jungle on a big stage yet. So I'm yet to see how that goes. Even mid lane, I don't think I've played on a big stage. So I've never played in front of an audience of 50,000 or whatever it was. So I'm yet to get that experience, and I'm yet to make playoffs as well. So yeah, I wouldn't put myself very high up on experience, but I think in terms of knowledge, I'm high up. But in terms of actual experience, not so sure yet.
Oh, I'm excited to see the kind of the evolution process of you as well as Excel, and to see if the position of yourself in top 5 becomes more contested as some of the lower down teams figure their stuff out. We'll say that's maybe the nicest way that I can phrase it. But thank you so much for joining us, Caedrel. LEC is tomorrow, 6 p.m. CET, starting with SK versus Mad Lions, our match of the week on Saturday. The final game is Fnatic versus G2. It's going to be an absolute banger. We're a few weeks away from our new set. I'm going to see if we can steal back some of the pictures that were taken from us. But in the meantime, we will see you all next week for another episode of EUphoria.